Item Lechochil Vavecha, Lechol Atzos Chol Yimade. Neranu B'Shuasecha, V'Shem Eloheinu Nidger. Yimale Adonai Kol Mishal Yisecha. Ato Yudaiti. Yeshia Adonai Mishicha. Anehu Mishmei Kodshe. B'Gures Yesha Yimine. Eilu Barechev, Eilu Basusim, Vanachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nazge. Heima Korban Apollo. Vanachnu Kamenu Vanaseda. Adonai Yeshia, Amalek Yaneinu, Yem Korenu. The beginners got now to learn Shavuos of Chassidus. If we finish before Shavuos, we'll start another mimer. Not start another mimer after Shavuos. But like we did with all the other Yom Tovim, there's so much to learn about each Yontif. And any mimer we would learn would be very limited just to one specific topic. So this is sort of a collage of different topics that Chassidus talks about, most of the most commonly known topics regarding Shavuos, and try to cover as much as we can. Good morning. Thank you very much. So as we have in the other booklets, in the first page, you have a list of the subjects. Each phrase or quote is either pasuk or Maimon Chazal, or something from Chassidus or a Chassidic term. And as we go along, we'll explain each one. So first, we'll start with page 16 in the booklet, which is the Gemara. First, we'll see what the Gemara says, and then we'll explain it al pi Chassidus. So we're doing the second column, the paragraph which begins, Omer Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Omer Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Again, before we go on, Shavuos is interesting that every Yontif, generally speaking, there's a Gemara that's dedicated to that Yontif. There's a Gemara called Shabbos. There's a Gemara called Pesachim, that's for Pesach. A Gemara called Rosh Hashanah. A Gemara called Yuma, that's Yom Kippur. And there's a Gemara that's called Sukkot. And there's a Gemara called Megillah, which covers Purim. There's no Gemara that's called Hanukkah, and there's no Gemara for Shavuos. By the way, there is a Gemara called Shavuos, but it's not about the holiday Shavuos, it's about the laws pertaining to making an oath, and those laws, same word. But there is a section in the Sefta Shabbos, as you see on top of the page, it says Shabbos. That's considered like the one place where in Gemara there's sort of a few pages concentrated on the subject of Matan Torah. I mean, part of it is that there are no special halachas in Shavuos that are different than any other yontif. Sukkot has special halachas, Lulav and Esrog and Sukkot. Pesach, of course, with Chometz and Matzah. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, but Shavuos, as far as the yontif is concerned, it's like any other yontif. The things you're allowed to do, the things you have to do, Kiddush. There's no special customs, not customs there are, but in halacha, in Torah, there's nothing that's unique about Shavuos compared to other Yom Tovim. So it starts like this, using this book, page 16. Amr B'Shulman B'Shah Shalom Moshe L'Amorim. When Moshe went up to Shemayim, Amru Malach Asher of Nekadosh Baruch Hu, he went up to Shemayim to receive the Torah. So the angels said to Hashem, Rebbeinu Shalom, Mali Lud Isha Benenu. What is a human being? The term they used was someone born from a woman doing down here, someone immortal, a human being of flesh and blood. Amalehem, so Hashem answered them, the Kabbalah Torah Ba. He came to receive the Torah. Amr Lefanav, so the angel said to Hashem, they didn't want to let the Torah go. Hamuda Genuza Shegenuza Lacham Cham Beyez V'Shivim V'Arbat Deiros Kedush Nevreilim. This precious treasure that was stored by you as a treasure for 974 generations before the world was created, something so precious, you are planning to give this to a flesh and blood? This is a quote from a pasuk in Tehillim, which means, what is a person that you should remember him? In other words, he's insignificant. The Son of Man that you should recall him. Hashem Adonenu Moadish Shimcha B'chol Haaretz. Hashem, that your name is so amazing in the whole world. You should rather bring or bestow your glory on the heavens, meaning give the Torah to the heavens, to the angels. Page 17, you have to turn the page, 17. So basically, they were protesting that Hashem is giving the Torah to humans, Hashem should give the Torah to them. Hashem said to Moshe, Moshe, answer them. Moshe said to Hashem, Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the world, I'm afraid of them. They could burn me with the breath of their mouths. So Hashem said, hold on to my throne, and you won't be afraid, and you can answer them. Shenemar, this is the meaning of a pasuk where it says, Ma'aches pnei kisei pershaz olov anone, which means he allowed him to hold on to his throne, and he spread his cloud over him. Hashem protected him because he was holding his throne. Using this. The Omar Rabbi Nachum, and Rabbi Nachum said, the language this teaches us, Shepirish Shindal Jud, Miziv Shchinasei Vanane Olav, Hashem spread the radiance of his presence on him to protect it. Omar Lafanav, so then now he turned to Hashem and said, Rebbeinu Shalom, this is his answer to the angels. This Torah that you're giving me, Maksiba, what's written in it? The first of the 10 commandments is Anech Hashem Alakecha, Asher Tzisicham Eretz Mitzrayim. I took you out of Egypt. Then he turned to the angels and he said to them, the Mitzrayim L'Radatem. You weren't in Mitzrayim. Torah doesn't apply to you. The Pare Ishpadatem. You were not slaves to Pare. Why do you even think that the Torah should belong to you? Then he went to the second one. What else does it say? You shouldn't have any other gods. So he said to the angels, you live amongst the nations of the world who worship idols, that the Torah has to caution you, do not worship idols. Page 18, continuation. Shuv Maksud, let's see what else it says there. Zachas Yom Shabbos Lakachi, remember to observe Shabbos. You don't work all week that you need Shabbos to rest. Again, so the Torah doesn't apply to you. Shuv Maksud, but then he went to the next one. What's the next one? L'sisa, that don't swear falsely in Hashem's name. When people are doing business and people want to prove that they're right, and to give support to their arguments in business, they went to Bezdin and they would take an oath. So the Torah says, don't swear falsely. So he said to the angels, Masa matnish bechem, you do business transactions and you have to be told, don't swear to in a false way. He went through all the Sarasadimus. Honor your father and your mother. You have a father and a mother. Shumak Siba, what else does it say? Do not steal, do not commit adultery, do not murder. You have envy among you, you have Yitzhara among you. And the Torah has to tell you not to do these things. So as soon as the angels heard his arguments, they immediately conceded to Hashem. They took back their demands that Hashem shouldn't give the Torah to the Yidden. And in fact, then there's another passage that says, Hashem Adonai Mu'adeh Shimcha, and they conclude, you should give your glory upon the heavens. I mean, saying, it doesn't say you should give the glory on the heavens, which means they withdraw from their demands. And not only that, but the angels became sort of friends with Moshe. Each one angel gave him a gift, naturally a spiritual gift. Shanema, like it says, Alisa Lamorim, Shavisa Shevi, Lakachta Matanim Badam. The pasuk, which is alluding to Moshe Rabbeinu, you went up to Shemayim, you captured a captive, meaning the Torah, and you took gifts because the angels gave him gifts. In fact, even the angel, which is the opposite of life, he also gave him a gift. What gift did he give him? Shenemar, it says in Chumash, there was a plague, people were dying, and Moshe took the incense, and when he lit up the incense, the plague stopped. He stood between the dead and the alive, and he stopped it suddenly. So the Gemara says, if not for the fact that that angel gave him this secret, that this could protect people from not dying, he wouldn't have known. So this was the gift that he gave him. This is like any other medrash, which every line has a gazillion questions. What does it mean? What Moshe Rabbeinu said to them was so genius, so brilliant. The angel said, oh, now we understand. And then before they didn't understand that they don't work all week and they don't need Shabbos and they don't worship idols and they don't have Yitzhahara. Everything's very simple here. So obviously, the debate between the angels and Moshe Rabbeinu is definitely much deeper. What was it about? So we're going to explain how Chassidus explains it. So we'll start with another question. Look at number 5 on the list on page 1. Number 5 is a quote, besides the quote we just had here when they said to them, this Torah which you have stored away for 900 and so many generations. There's another quote, Alpayim Shana Kodma Torah La'olam. The Torah was 2,000 years preceded the creation of the world. And the question is, how could we speak about 900 generations or 2,000 years? Before the world was created, there was no space, there was no substance in the world, and there was no time. Time itself is a creation by Hashem. Time only is another measurement of space. If there's nothing that exists in space, then there's also no time. So how could it be 2,000 years before creation? And there are other Maimar Chazal that also talk about the Torah preceding creation. Number 6 is an example. It's a pasuk, Ve'eye Esle Omen. If you want to take a look at the source, if you look at page 36 in the booklet, it's a pasuk in Mishlei. The simple pshat in the pasuk is Ve'eye Esle Omen. Is referring to I was then his like nursing, taking care of him. I was his delight every day. But the Gemara says that the word Amen comes from the word umnus, which means skill. And the Gemara says it means that the Torah are the Hashem's tools with which He created the world. Just like any worker or skilled person, no matter how skillful he is, he still needs tools to work with. So Hashem's tool with which He worked with and created the world is the Torah. Again, implying that the Torah preceded creation. Number 8 is a similar quote. Istako be'iraisa ubara alma, which means Hashem looked into the Torah and He created the world. Which means, the Gemara says that just like a builder has blueprints, so you call an architect, he makes the blueprints, and in the blueprints you have all the details, where the doors are going to be, where the windows are going to be, where the staircase is going to be, and where every single detail of the structure. So too, Hashem did the same. First, He had the Torah; those are the blueprints, and based on Torah, that's how He built the world. So the world was created in a way that it should accommodate everything that's written in Torah. But again, how could that make sense? How could the Torah be that before the world was created, the Torah is all about things that happen in the world? The story of Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Yidden going in Mitzrayim, going out of Mitzrayim, and the Midbar. How could this all be before the creation? The answer to this is number 9. Number 9 is also a pasuk in Mishlei, page 37, where it says, Kashayemar Mashal Akadmoni. You see where it's underlined. In English, they say an ancient proverb. But again, the Gemara says it's referring to Torah, and the Torah is Hashem's mashal. So the word kadmoni means the one who preceded everything. Who is the one that preceded everything in creation? Is Hashem. And mashal kadmoni means Hashem's mashal, meaning that the Torah is Hashem's mashal. What does it mean that the Torah is Hashem's mashal? So this has come up before. And basically it means that when you look in the Torah and you see the wisdom that's found in Torah, but the truth is whatever is in Torah and the wisdom in Torah is really only a mashal for something much deeper. Remember we spoke about mashal, the Maimon that we learned about Netzirah, that a mashal is usually used by someone like Rabbi Meir, and the same with Shlomo HaMelech, who is very brilliant. When he understands things, he understands it on a very deep and very abstract level. It's so deep and so abstract that he cannot find the words to explain it to a student, because his level of understanding is way, way beyond their level of understanding. And therefore, no matter how much he would use simple words and simplify it whichever way, it will still be too deep for the student to grasp. Just like think of ourselves, if you try to explain to a little child, a very young child, you can choose the age, whatever age you want. But a very young child, you try to explain the difference between intellect and emotion, it's too abstract. No matter how you say it and what way you bring it out, they won't get it. So we're talking about people who are, geniuses, giants, intellectual giants, and they understood things on a very deep, abstract level. And it was so deep that even to their students, they couldn't really communicate what they understand. And the only way they were able to do that is through a mushal. And what's a mushal? A mushal is something which is usually a little story and has a very simple meaning, the story. But the mushal is where all the depth of this concept is hidden in the mushal. And what happens if the mushal itself is too deep for the students to understand? Then you need a mushal for the mushal. So he said that's what it says, that Shlomo Melech said 3,000 Mishalim. It's not the way it appears on the surface, that throughout his lifetime, he was able to teach and give over 3,000 Mishalim. No, it means that every concept that he understood, in order to communicate that to others, he had to give a mushal to a mushal to a mushal to a mushal until they would understand it. So basically, it means that anything you learn in Torah is a certain principle of logic behind it. The principle of logic is much deeper than, the mushal for this, like we always, just to make it simple, so we have to use the simplest mushal, is like, I told this to you quite a few times, that if you would teach a child, first time in his life, that he hears about anything it's arithmetic. You want to teach him that 2 + 2 = 4, right? And you teach him by showing him, demonstrating. You have 2 chairs and 2 chairs. Then you tell him to count, then you say, how much is it all together? 4. So if you ask the child tomorrow when you walk into the classroom, and you say, I want to ask you a question. If you have 2 oranges and 2 oranges, how much do you have all together? They will probably answer you, you never taught us anything about oranges. You never heard anything about oranges. How are we supposed to know? So you teach them that 2 oranges and 2 oranges are also 4. The next day you come in and you ask them what would be if you have 2 apples and 2 apples. They'll tell you never taught us anything about apples. But that's what you do every day. One day oranges, one day is apple, one day chairs, and one day hats, and another day tables. And eventually what happens, they get the idea that it's not about oranges, not about chairs, not about apples. There's a certain principle here. The principle of logic is that 2 + 2 = 4. Once they get that, then the concept itself could be applied to everything and anything. So the same thing is even with the thing that we understand. We understand things in a certain area. This is in the laws of muktzah, and this is something about the laws of damage, and this is about the laws of a carbon, and this is about the laws that are agricultural laws, but each halacha has a certain principle of logic to it. The principle of logic, it has much more depth to it. We study it and we know it, how it's applied to agriculture, how it's applied to the laws of damage, how it's applied to the laws of Shabbos. But there's a principle of logic that's much more abstract. It's not related specifically to this or to that. It's a raw, pure principle of logic. And that's much deeper, but that's also much more abstract, and it's harder to grasp. So what we're saying is that it would be foolish of anyone to think that the logic that we understand when we learn Torah, that's Hashem's logic. Hashem is infinite, and his way of thinking is infinite, if we can even use the word thinking. And therefore, obviously, even when we talk about Hashem's Chokhmah, because Hashem is even higher than Chokhmah, that his Chokhmah is infinitely, infinitely greater than anything what we can possibly imagine and experience. So that means that everything in Torah has much more depth to it than what we see on the surface. And that's the Torah in its more abstract form before it's applied to things. So if you learn a halacha in Torah about what happens if an ox attacks another animal under these and these circumstances, what would be the halacha? There's a certain logic to that, whatever the halacha is going to be. So that scenario and that logic is much, much deeper than what we understand or what children understand when they're learning Gemara, they're 9 years old. And the logic itself is so much deeper that it exists on thousands of levels of depth. And when we say that the Torah preceded creation, it means that all the Chachma in Torah, Torah is Hashem's wisdom. The wisdom of Hashem is something which is much higher, much deeper than what we see and what we read in the words of Torah. It's the wisdom of Hashem is applied to all the things that are found in Torah. But the wisdom of itself, in its own right, is much deeper than what we see. And therefore, everything in the Torah would be considered a mashal for what Hashem truly understands.
Is like mashal?
What?
It's like mashal, what Hashem understood.
Just like a person, if he has something very deep, he uses a mashal to explain it. The mashal is very simple. So Hashem, the Torah, the way we know it, the way we understand it, is just a mashal for the deeper way of understanding it, which is the way Hashem understands it. But when you learn Chassidus, we also learn that there's Chochmah in the world of Atzilus, there's Chochmah in the world of Bria, there's Chochmah in the world of Yetzirah, and there's Chochmah in our world. So what we're saying in different words is that whatever we see in the Torah, there's a deeper way of understanding it the way they understand it in the world of Yetzirah, and there's a deep way of understanding it the way they understand it in the world of Bria, and there's a deep way of understanding it the way it's understood in the world of Atzilus. And what we understand is all the way at the bottom of the ladder. It's a bushel. Yep.
But also in different ways, you understand it like shot or mishrash or like is that like are those different mashalim or like the way we understand that versus like when it's in the Rebbe understands it, is he understanding like a different like let's say Shalach HaMelech 3,000 mashalim. So is he like higher up on the rung or like Drush is higher up on the rung than shot, or it's still all like in the same mashalim?
No, they're in our realm. The drush and soid is the deeper, and the sip and the pshat is the mashal.
Okay.
Like just to use an example of something which we learned recently about the two sons of Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
The two sons of Aaron doesn't mean a mashal, doesn't mean that it's not the real thing. When it says in the Chumash that the two sons of Aaron drank wine before they went into the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan, and as a result of that, they died. On this simple level, you learn Rashi, it appears to be that they violated something, did something wrong, and that's why they died. When we come along and we learn what it says in the Orach Chaim, that what happened was, when it says in the Torah that they brought a fire which was undesirable, he says the fire is referring to a fire of love. That they were overcome with such a love for Hashem to the point that the neshama left their body. The neshama could no longer be contained in their body. And that was something which was not what Hashem wanted. But it's very different than saying that they violated a commandment. Here it was on the contrary. Their love for Hashem was sort of so strong, so intense, and to the point that it could no longer be contained in their body. So understanding what the Orach Chaim says is sort of the real thing, and understanding the simple pshat. When we say it's a mashal, we don't mean it's not true. It's still true that they went in and they drank wine, but it's not that the wine that they drank, remember we explained that it opens up certain channels and chambers in a person to be able to understand things deeper. And as a result of that, they had a much deeper, and that was the day that Hashem Shechina came down. So they were exposed by such godliness. They were so overwhelmed that the neshama left their body. So the simple pshat is the mashal. The deeper pshat is the real thing. But what we understand as deeper is also a mashal to the real deeper pshat, even in that.
When Mashiach comes, we understand people.
Yes. So in fact, when it says that Shlomo Melech gave 3,000 a shalom, one of the ways of explaining it is he had to bring it down from the world of Bria to the world of Yetzirah to the world of Yosiyah. And in each world, there were 1,000 levels where it had to go through and be brought down lower and lower. So that's why there was 3,000. But from this, we understand that the entire Torah, every line in Torah, every word in Torah, everything that's found in Torah, all this has layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of depth. And basically, when let's say it talks in the Torah about the laws that pertain to a husband and wife, then you learn a mimer that the husband is Zoh and the wife is Malchus. So the husband is the sphere of Yisod, and the wife is the sphere of Malchus. And whatever it says in the Torah about the relationship and the interaction between husband and wife is a reflection of what goes on in the spiritual between Zoh and Malchus. So the Zoh and Malchus is the real thing, and what goes on down here between husband and wife is sort of the mashal. But when you understand Zoh and Malchus in the world of Yetzirah, it's much lower and simpler than compared to the way Zoh and Malchus understood in the world of Bria. And that's much more simpler than what it's understood in the world of Atzilus. So basically, there's mashal beyond mashal, beyond mashal, beyond mashal, beyond mashal. So when it says in the Torah, honor your father and your mother, that could also mean simply a father and a mother, or it could mean something deeper. Down here, it's a father and a mother the way we know it. But if we talk about the principle of the matter, the father and the mother could be like we know in Chassidus, Chochmah is called the father in the Zohar, and Bina is called the mother. And in fact, it's explained that just like father and mother bring a child into the world, that's how Chochmah and Bina produce emotion in the same way. And just like with the father and the mother, each one contributes what they contribute. So there are Maimarim places in Chassidus where it explains that the role of the father and the role of the mother in giving birth to a child is a very precise reflection of the role of Chochmah and the role of Bina in giving birth to emotion. Which means there's a concept of father and mother on a higher level. And the same thing with Shabbos, when it talks about work or Shabbos, there's Shabbos in a literal sense, there's Shabbos in a more spiritual sense. And the same with all the Aseret HaDivos. So the Malachim argued and said to Hashem, why giving the Torah to the Yidden? It's basically saying, why take the Torah and bring it down to the lowest, simplest level and explain it like you explain a baby? Give the Torah to us and we'll learn the Torah in its real, pure form, which is the spiritual form. And that's a good argument. So imagine that when you're teaching a child, you teach them in a very childish way. But imagine if you would teach an adult in a childish way. They would say, "What are you doing? Why don't you give me the real thing?" So the Malachim were basically saying, "Hashem, you have the choice either to give the Torah to the Yidden. If you do that, you have to bring things down such a low level, which is hiding the real depth of Torah, or you can give the Torah to us, and with us you can reveal the Torah as it is in its true depth." So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, I mean, what's the details have to be explained, and is explained in different places, but the general thrust of his answer was that the whole purpose of creation is dafka this gashmistic world, and the whole purpose of creation is that we should experience and observe the mitzvahs in the most gashmistic of physical form, and therefore the Torah has to be brought down to the most gashmistic of physical form. Even though it's the most hidden, but this is the purpose of creation. That was his answer to the Malachim. And when they realize that, they recognize that, then they realize that even though spiritually angels are much higher than humans, but Hashem's desire for creation and the whole purpose of creation is that the Torah and the mitzvahs as they are in the most physical, mystical level. Yeah.
Good questions. Like, the thing that like angels, like, I mean, in my spiritual, like non-human spiritual, no learn Torah, and like also what do you mean that like Hashem gave it to Jewish people, like how is our, I guess, relationship with Torah different than the angels? Like, does it belong to them? They can't interact with it?
Good question. So if you look at the list on page number 1, I skipped the first line. And the reason why I skipped it, because we have to have a separate class on that alone. But the first line reads, Torah loy b'shamayim. The Torah is no longer in Shemayim, it's down here. So you're asking a good question. Just because it became explained, so to speak, in a simple level, it still exists in the deeper level. So what does it mean that the Torah is not in Shemayim? But it's based on a story in Gemara. We're going to learn that Gemara inside to see. It's one of those really incredible stories. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya somewhere that most of the hidden secrets of Torah are in the Midrashim. When you read a Medrash, most of the time, very strange. Doesn't really make sense. There's a lot of things that are questionable. And the reason is because really, in Midrashim, that's where the hidden secrets of Torah are found. And therefore, on the surface, you don't get it. But as you start reading more into it and see the deeper meaning to it, here too, if you read that story, but the content of the story is that Torah is not b'shamayim. And what does that mean practically? So we'll soon see when we get there. But I just want to bring out one more thing, and that is number 10. It says, "HaTorah medaberes b'elyonim ramezes l'tachtenim." This is something the Rebbe quotes often from the Shalom. The Shalom says that people make a mistake, and they think that the Torah is talking about earthly things, but it's also alluding to heavenly things. So when you read something in the Chumash, people see what it says in the Chumash, and they say, this could represent that, and that could represent another thing, and the third thing could represent the third thing, and there's a very interesting message here. So the Shalom says the truth is the opposite. The Torah actually speaks, Bo'el Yonim, the true and deep meaning of the words in Torah are actually about heavenly things, but the Torah alludes to earthly things. In other words, the Torah is in essence, like if a genius explains something in a simple way, what's the real understanding is not the simple. The real understanding is what he understands. And the simple way is just so that he'd be able to communicate it to us. So the same thing here. When it says something in Torah on a simple level, is the other way around. The real meaning of the words in Torah is something deep. But in order for us to be able to grasp it and understand it, Hashem took all these deep concepts and presented it in the way it's presented in Torah, which is a simple way, so that we should be able to grasp it. So when you learn halacha on Shabbos, that if you put something in a kli rishon, it's really hot. Once you pour in a kli sheni, it's already cooled off. That's the halacha. But again, there's a certain principle about this, that the first vessel that receives it still has it hot, and the second vessel is not the same. You can apply this to everything and anything. There's a principle behind it. And the principle behind it can be understood even in Gashmias. I mean, just to give an example, let's say you experience something and you're on a high from what you saw, and you share this with a friend, and they're also on a high. Is it the same or is it different? The person who originally experienced whatever it was, the impact is so much greater. The next person is also impacted by you, but it's not the same. That's a klisheni. Person with a klish. You can apply it to everything, but everything you can apply it to is still in this gashmistical world is still a mashal compared to what it would mean when you talk about the spheres. This would also apply in the spheres. So therefore, when it says something in the Torah, whether it's a halacha, whether it's one of the stories in the Torah, in essence, the Torah is talking about something going on in the spiritual realm. But the Torah communicates it in a way that we can relate to it, not the way people think. The reverse, the real Torah is about an ox and a donkey and a monkey and things that are happening down here. But there's some sort of a hint to deeper things. When you look at things like that, it just gives you a different understanding of Torah, and it gives you a different understanding of how we approach Torah. Like sometimes a person reads something in the Chumash or reads a certain halacha, and they don't understand why this had to be this way, or why the halacha is with this detail. Couldn't this detail be different? Once you begin to understand that all these details are really a reflection and it's really a manifestation of something much, much deeper, it becomes, even if I don't know every detail, but just the knowledge alone helps me relate to it in a different way. We learn in the Chumash that when Hashem created Adam and Chava, he put Adam to sleep and then created Chava from Adam. There's so much in Kabbalah and in Chassidus that Chava refers to the sphere of Malchus. And what happens on Rosh Hashanah is regarding Malchus and all the Maimorim that explain that, but it's all contained in this story in Chumash that Hashem put Adam to sleep, and after he put him to sleep, he created Chava. So again, the real thing is what it means, Beruchnis. It's about the spheres of Zah and Malchus, and it's about the creation and what happened to all the worlds on the day of Rosh Hashanah. But in the Torah, it's presented in that form that Adam was put to sleep and Chava was created, and you might not even know that Zah Malchus even exists, and just know this story. It means you only know the mashal without the nimshal. So in a case like that, just use as an example, what is the real thing that the Torah is referring to? Adam and Chava begashmius, and it hints to spheres, or the Torah is telling us what happened in the spiritual realm regarding creation and how it manifested down here with Adam being put to sleep. It's the other way around. Okay, so now we need to understand what does it mean that the Torah is no longer in Shemayim. On the contrary, the way we explained it, the Torah is understood on a simple level, and the Malachim have the Torah on the higher level. What does that mean? So we're going to look at a certain Gemara, and also number 11 is one of the very, very difficult things to understand. There's a very famous quote in Gemara, Elu v'elu divri elikim chayim. Shammai says one thing, Beis Hillel says the opposite, but both are the words of the living God. And this is one of the things which are very difficult to understand. How can they both be true? They're both Torah, that means they're both emes, they're both godly, but one says the opposite of the other. So hopefully after we explain this, number 1 and number 11, we'll be able to understand and get the whole picture. To be continued tomorrow, with Hashem.
אני שואל על תורה למשל ההבנה של השם.
כן. אוקיי. Everybody?
Thank you.
Like, how you comment on your own life?